you remember what it was like when you were growing up on the play yard and somebody would tease you about almost anything? It has come to an entirely different arena in these modern times with technology. We're talking about an anti-bullying prevention effort by the Judiciary of Guam along with the Department of Education. Jolene Respicio is my guest on Something to Talk About. Welcome to Something to Talk About. As I said, we're talking about the anti-bullying campaign. It's Anti-Bullying Prevention Month, October is. And I can't think of a better person actually to speak about this than Jolene Respicio. She's on the table with us at King's Restaurant this morning. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's nice to have you. You know, I said I couldn't think of anybody better because I think the whole idea and the court's representation of this topic on Guam was originated from your office.
Yes.
It did, didn't it? I mean, at least that portion of it for the government of Guam. How would the courts have become involved? I mean, early in.
It was really important to us because one of the goals, not just of the Judiciary of Guam as Guam courts, but also nationwide, they're really encouraging law-related education because prevention is key. So the idea that we want to prevent youth from entering the courts, and so it's one way that we work with stakeholders to bring law-related education into the classroom directly to the students so that we can avoid them from coming into the juvenile justice system. So we want to teach them the laws and rules, especially in this case, of course, with bullying, and to prevent them from coming in because they can possibly result in a more serious incident.
And we see that. I mean, and we
Yes.
see that all the time. Let's go back to what we probably remember as schoolyard,
Yes.
bullying and teasing back in the day. And I think that there have been a number of documentaries or films that kind of romanticize that part of our lives, especially with boys. Where the kid would get bullied by the other bully in the schoolyard. And I mean, it goes back as far as, human relations,
Yes.
that kind of human relations goes. See, it's never quite, I mean, it's never something that goes away, but there are ways that you can temper the severe effects of bullying. Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the difference is, back then, of course, it was something that you could go to school, and if it was happening and you were being bullied, at least you can go home at the end of the day and have some reprieve and feel safe at least at home. These days it's so different for our kids and adults as well, because you can't. It stays with you 24/7 because of our digital technology. Everything is 24/7 online, and it doesn't stop. So
it's taken to a whole nother level with the technology.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think that's where prevention is even more critical, in this digital age, because it's harder to just have some type of rest from it, and you have to be able to deal with it in our daily lives all day long.
Is bullying in the eye of the beholder?
Oftentimes it really can be, but I think that it also has to do with they usually say, for example, if a person that's bullying another person, one way to be able to really tell is a lot of times many of the kids, they say their excuses. I was just joking around with them. They really think, we're just playing, we're teasing. We're just, we didn't mean it. We were joking. It was funny, and it wasn't meant to hurt them. But in that case, it is in the eyes of the beholder, because if the other person, if the other student or child is not laughing with you, then clearly it's affecting them in a negative way.
Well, then with all the attention, here's what I hear, with all the attention then on bullying, have we also developed an ultra-sensitive child or victim?
You know, what's interesting is a big part of our outreach training these days is focusing on empathy and mindfulness and self-regulation and some other ways that we can help prevent bullying using also our evidence-based programs. And believe it or not, it's really, you know, again, going back to the digital devices that many kids, you know, they're infants when they start using them, I believe, these days. So if that's the case, what happens is that they lose a lot of face-to-face connection. And so we're trying to, you know, one of the things is that they're developing emotions differently because the emojis are taking its place.
Yeah. But is it also in part how adults respond?
I think so these days too.
Yeah.
Because many of us rely on our smartphones, right?
Yeah.
To be able to also conduct business or just to communicate quickly, that it's, I guess, instant. You know, it's so quick these days that it makes it easier than going to maybe see someone or talk to them in person.
Well, then how about when a child feels like they've been bullied? They know the definition because it's taught to them,
Yes.
right? Just as a matter of prevention. So they recognize what bullying looks like and what it feels like. And the child goes to the parent, and I know that parents become, I mean, any parent does, probably, you know, taking it to a sort of different level of reaction and response. Does that also kind of lend to a larger case, or is that okay?
It can. I think what's important is they took the first step in sharing that information with the parents, because, you know, based on the surveys that we've done over the years, majority of the students do not tell anyone because they feel they can handle it on their own. And so we are encouraging them to report it, to let others know, because oftentimes they may have difficulty self-regulating. And so, and it could really, you know, create other problems and emotions for them, and maybe even just going about their daily lives. And so parents do, when they do get involved, I mean, that we certainly encourage that, and we want them to be involved.
Right.
And it's so difficult because, yes, parents, you know, they want to, you can only see it from their perspective, you know, from their perspective of the child. And so it's really about having that communication, that dialogue also with the other parties, and, you know, through the school or through someone, you know, a mediator, or again, usually if it's at the school level, the administrators, they also help to kind of mediate.
Do these cases, do they most often happen at the school level? Is that where you would find more?
Or maybe like of course, bullying interactions at school, like more physical, tends to be physical or social exclusion or rumors and that sort of thing. However, of course, it could either start online, you know, some form of cyberbullying, and then it spills into the schoolyard.
Okay.
So it's kind of a
But you're
combination.
finding predominantly they use the social media for bullying than they do the schoolyard. Thanks for the fruit. Oh gosh, that's beautiful. I appreciate. Well, better this. Boy, this is great. Thank you. So when we're talking about cyberbullying, we're talking about a whole nother arena than what most people are understanding, and the width of this is scary.
It is.
Because you think that you're dealing with a small circle of kids who are friends, but it can become a global thing.
Yes.
And so how do you prevent that from happening in the, you know, in the home, in the school? How does that work?
I think the one of the key things that we try to teach not only our students and school staff, but it's important that we also reach the community and to the parents specifically, because, you know, we model our behaviors to our children, and so we need to also show them how to use their digital devices responsibly. And so it's really a matter of trying to just continue to raise that awareness that cyberbullying is against the law, and that also goes in like with sexting. You know, it's very much against the law, and with bullying, but with cyberbullying, because kids get that sense of anonymity that there are online, they have a false sense of courage to be able to do these things. And so we're trying to show them, through our outreach that, it is against the law, and anything you post or do online is public and permanent. This is public and permanent information that you can't just press delete and think, okay, it'll go away. If there's some serious consequences involved with that type of incident, it'll come back to them. It can easily be recovered. So it's really reaching also the adults that teach our children, that parent, and to be able to, like for example, some tips for parents would be like to charge your child's cell phone in the room at night. Believe it or not, a lot of kids are using it after they're supposed to be in bed, and they're still on their devices and stuff. Or just
is that one normally? Is that like the golden hour for this kind of behavior? Students at the end of the day, maybe?
I'm not sure if it's a golden hour, but I think it's all day long, probably. Right?
Yeah.
But I think it's they're still on it. Like it's like an addiction to being on digital devices, and they're always with it. And whether it's just maybe watching YouTube clips, which many kids are very very much into these days, it's really that they're not taking a break from getting off their devices and cultivating and building other types of connections,
personal relationships.
Right.
Yeah. We're with Jolene Respicio, and we'll take a quick break here, but when we come back, I want to talk about really some of the definitions. I mean, when is bullying, harassment, and can adults be bullied, that sort of thing, and then really how we as a government are trying to stop it. That's a big effort. We're at something to talk about. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Our conversation is on bullying, and before the break I asked about the differences between bullying and harassment. Do they feel like the same thing?
Well, as far as the law is concerned, they certainly are the same thing, because bullying is charged as harassment, and I think the most important thing is, by definition, bullying is usually it's something where one person feels, of course, uncomfortable when another person is harassing them and stuff. But of course, it's also, it may not be just one time. It's usually repeated. It's often repeated, more than once, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so it's really a matter of reporting it. I think the most important thing is to be able to report it at the school level. Students are also still learning themselves how to, even though they know the definition, it's important that for whatever the reason is, to be able to report it so that those school administrators can help them, whether it becomes a bullying incident, and if it's serious, then, the parents do have also a right to take action and file something, because it is harassment.
What is the age group where it's most prevalent?
I think that it really, because it starts off at a young age, and at first we try to teach the young kids how to distinguish between horseplaying, teasing, and actual,
when you cross the line.
Exactly. And so, it does, in the very beginning, it kind of starts off a little bit, and then during the middle school years, becomes a little bit higher. I would say those are kind of the more vulnerable years. And then as they get to high school, I think they have a lot of other things kind of happening. So it does taper off at that point.
Is it a maturity thing too, or is it just because kids are more occupied with a higher workload in high school?
Possibly. I think it is. Or one of the other things is, at the high school level, it kind of turns into something different. Now they're into, of course, relationships, and so unfortunately we see, cases of sexting at that high school level. That's really more where it just kind of changes. The dynamics are a little different there. And for the middle school agers, it's usually because that's the age group where they're discovering themselves. They're trying to find their identity during that age group, and so when they're at a older age, I think it's it's kind of more towards, a little bit more towards the cyberbullying realm or the online realm. You know,
Yeah.
and
Get
that's
a little
what
more
we're seeing.
sophisticated.
Yeah, but it does,
Yeah.
in a sense, bullying in itself does kind of taper
Yeah.
off a little bit more in the high school.
When you use the term bullying, is that a term that is exclusively used for a certain age group? I just asked if there were, can you be bullied as an adult?
Oh, absolutely. There's, every day there could be workplace bullying, and it does happen quite often. And people don't really, I mean, maybe we don't talk about it very much, but it happens all the time, even online, on many social media platforms where, adults are really engaging in a lot of, online fighting and back and forth, and, it becomes very ugly. Those are actually forms of
Bullying.
cyberbullying and harassment.
And harassment. And can you, for example, if you wanted to file a complaint against something, bullying isn't necessarily a charge, is it, under the law? Or is it become harassment?
It is a part of it's harassment under the law, especially related to the Guam DOE. So, under their rules in our Guam code, it is harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and then they kind of get more specific with the school policies and so forth. But on the adult level, there's still, various forms of, again, harassment.
Yeah.
So depending on the severity and, other factors, of course, adults have, every right to go in and seek counsel if it's something that they feel that has been a serious harassment to them.
Does the Department of Education do a good job, or are teachers even adequately trained to identify and help resolve before it comes to
That's
an
a really good
escalation?
question, because teachers, I truly believe teachers are superstars, because
Yeah.
you really have to put on that hat. You got to go into the classroom, and you're there to teach them on subjects. And when bullying occurs and other types of forms of mistreatment, it really it's a distraction for the students. And so it makes it harder for them to do their jobs, what they're there to do. And so nowadays, what happens is in over the past decade, the focus has really been also on that other positive behavior education for the kids and their students to prevent them. So teachers do get a lot of training in the Department of Education, many positive behavior models and evidence-based programs. However, it's so difficult, I believe, for them to be able to sometimes pick up on things. And these days, because kids still generally, as they've responded, they don't like to report it very much.
Yeah.
Or they don't like to share it.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to hopefully break that, where they feel comfortable at least talking to a trusted adult, whether it's at school or at home. And so, or even if they share it with a friend, because after they tell no one, they then likely tell at least a friend.
Yeah.
And so we're hoping that at least the friends will also encourage their friend, if they're told something, to share it. And so the teachers, they have to then wear two hats, to also, behavioral management, classroom management, to avoid those distractions so that their students can focus on their schoolwork. So I believe that the Department of Education does an excellent job at training their staff to be able to handle these types of situations. But it's hard. I think it's really difficult because you also have so many other distractions and so
Yeah.
many things going on in the classroom.
Are there cultural issues as well? Cultural meaning maybe English is not the first language in a lot of, I don't know how many cases, but that there is a language barrier. There are kids who come from different cultures, from Asia, from our neighbor islands, that walk into a situation a lot of times that it's really difficult to absorb how to fit in.
Right.
And so you find these huge differences in culture that become natural weapons for kids to use on another child who might be less informed about something, or doesn't fit in well, or doesn't look the part, or whatever motivation there is to make fun of somebody.
I believe that there's although our numbers, they're not generally high in for racial bullying and that and so forth. It does exist, of course, and I think it's similar to probably what we've experienced growing up. I think that's just those cultural differences, whether it's dressing differently or speaking differently, or with an accent, or just doing different things, different customs and so forth. And so I believe it's not. My opinion would be that it's not that big of a difference from maybe years ago. But we don't see high numbers. At least I don't see high numbers as far as the
Cultural or racial classes.
Racial bullying.
Yeah.
But yes, it does exist, and we do hear of many incidents or cases that are for that reason.
Yeah. Is this a federal program that you're operating?
Yes, the Judiciary of Guam. We are contracted with the Guam Department of Education to do our law-related education, civics education programs.
So is this part of their curriculum, or is this outreach, more like a community or school outreach?
We do a combination, so not just to the public schools, but also to the private schools who are covered under also the federal programs funding. So what we do is it's multi-tiered, so we go out, we do outreach training on bullying, cyberbullying, and sexting, and then we also train teachers, like in our favorite programs too, our Play by the Rules program, where we teach them. There's a book and everything. We teach them the Guam youth laws, and then the teachers are the ones that often they build that into their curriculum, and that also involves a lot of the bullying and technology information that they need, and the laws that relate to that as far as that curriculum. So they build that into their curriculum. Oftentimes they use it, for example, in social studies.
Okay.
They teach them.
Okay, so that would be a forum. That would be the venue.
Right. So that's another way that they can use it.
So just quickly, what is up for October? What are you attempting to do?
Well, what we're trying to do is get out there. Our focus this month is to go out to the schools and do more trainings. We're kind of trying to target, like the 8th graders or some elementary. I know some public elementary schools we're going out to as well. Not necessarily just the 8th grade level, but we are focusing on our unselfie presentation and
Unselfie,
how to flip the lenses and do some perspective taking so that we can build empathy, rebuild and grow empathy in our community.
This is a selfie culture.
Absolutely.
We've turned the cameras on ourselves. We know what we look like, and we want everybody to know it and think it.
We want to help.
It's an interesting concept.
Each one of us that we need to flip the lens and put ourselves in another person's shoes and get out there and share the kindness. Like this year's prevention month theme is kindness, pass it on. So
pass it on.
to remind us to have that care and compassion for others. What can we do to help someone?
I like that. I'm all down for that. You let me know anytime I can help you with that. I am all over the support for that.
Kindness, pass it on.
Kindness, pass it on. Let that be your motto for October, and hopefully it'll bleed into the holiday season as well.
Oh, yes.
Unselfie. I'm all over that phrase too. I'm going to use that as much as I can. Jolene, thanks. It was such a good time to see you again. And thank you for joining us on Something to Talk About. We'll see you on the radio.